Yep, that's a beloved character from a hit show, and you're probably wondering how he got into this situation, starring in a catastrophic failure of a spin-off. Some TV shows didn't just end. Their legacies got sideswiped, steamrolled, or straight up abandoned by networks trying to squeeze one last drop of magic from a classic. And with that, we got some of the most forgettable, ill-advised, and downright bizarre sitcom spin-offs in television history. Today, we're counting down the spin-offs that deserve to be forgotten, short-lived disasters that never got a real shot and probably shouldn't have in the first place. Our journey into the graveyard of bad ideas begins with a spin-off so baffling it took one of the most popular characters from Happy Days and sent him to California with a laugh track and a dream that died almost instantly. 1. Joni Loves Chachi. In the world of Happy Days, the romance between Joni Cunningham and Chachi Arcola was a pop culture phenomenon. Erin Moran and Scott Baio were teen idols, their characters' love story culminating in a massive TV wedding. Network executives at ABC practically got dollar signs in their eyes, seeing a golden opportunity to launch a new hit. The idea was simple. Take the two young lovebirds, move them from Milwaukee to Chicago, and have them pursue their rock and roll dreams. The show, Joni Loves Chachi, was a guaranteed, can't-miss, slam dunk hit. It was supposed to be easy until it wasn't. The spin-off was a ratings disaster. The chemistry that had worked so well in small doses on Happy Days couldn't carry an entire show. The music was cheesy, the plots were thin, and the magic was gone. The wild part is, the show was so unpopular that ABC canceled it after just 17 episodes and promptly sent the characters back to Happy Days for its final season, where they got married as if their disastrous Chicago adventure had never happened. It was a rare case of a network admitting its mistake and hitting the reset button in real time. Joni Loves Chachi was a high-profile flameout, but our next spin-off took a beloved character from a classic 60s sitcom and gave him a new family in a show that nobody asked for. 2. The New Gomer Pyle. Gomer Pyle, the lovable, goofy gas station attendant from The Andy Griffith Show, was one of the most popular characters of the 1960s. His spin-off, Gomer Pyle, USMC, was a massive hit, running for 5 successful seasons. Jim Nabors, with his signature "Golly," was a television icon. So, in the early 90s, when TV was awash with nostalgia, producers decided it was time to bring Gomer back. The result was The New Gomer Pyle, USMC, a pilot for a new series that saw Gomer, now a gunnery sergeant, dealing with a new generation of recruits. At first it looked harmless, but the pilot was a jarring mix of old-school charm and awkward attempts at modern humor. The world had changed dramatically since the 60s, and the character of the naive, bumbling country boy in the military just didn't land the same way. The pilot failed to capture the gentle spirit of the original and was not picked up for a full series. It was a forgotten attempt to reboot a classic, a reminder that some characters are perfect time capsules that are best left in the past. 3. Aftermash. How do you follow up one of the most beloved and successful television shows of all time? That was the impossible task facing the creators of Aftermash. When MASH ended its historic run with a finale watched by over 106 million people, CBS was desperate to keep the magic going. The spin-off centered on 3 of the original show's supporting characters, Colonel Potter, Klinger, and Father Mulcahy, now working together at a chaotic veterans hospital back in the United States. From the outside, it seemed simple, until you dig deeper. The show was not a comedy. It was a heavy, often depressing dramedy that dealt with the serious and tragic aftermath of war, including PTSD and the struggles of returning veterans. While noble in its intentions, it was a massive tonal whiplash for audiences who were expecting the witty banter and lighthearted chaos of the 4077. The show was initially a ratings hit due to its lead-in from the A-Team, but when CBS moved it to a new time slot opposite Cheers, the ratings plummeted. It was canceled after its second season, leaving the stories of its beloved characters unresolved. It was a bold and well-intentioned show that ultimately proved that you can't go home again, especially when home is a place as dark as a VA hospital. 4. The Tortellis. On the iconic sitcom Cheers, Carla Tortelli was a force of nature, a wisecracking, perpetually pregnant waitress with a brood of unruly children. Her sleazy lounge lizard ex-husband, Nick Tortelli, played by the great Dan Hedaya, was a recurring source of hilarious torment. In 1987, NBC decided that what America really needed was an entire show about this dysfunctional family. The result was The Tortellis. The show followed Nick and his ditzy new wife Loretta as they moved to Las Vegas to start a new life. Carla's sister, Charlotte, even tagged along for reasons that were never entirely clear. And then came the part nobody expected. The show was a complete and utter dud. The characters, who were hilarious in small doses as antagonists for the gang at Cheers, were grating and unlikable as the leads of their own show. The jokes were tired, the premise was thin, and the Vegas setting felt cheap. The real shocker was still to come. Despite being a spin-off of the #1 show on television, The Tortellis was a ratings catastrophe. It was canceled after just 13 episodes. Nick Tortelli would later return to Cheers for a few more guest appearances, with his failed Vegas adventure never mentioned again. A classic case of a spin-off being so bad that even the parent show pretended it never happened. 5. Checking in. In the groundbreaking 70s sitcom The Jeffersons, Florence Johnston was the sharp-tongued, wisecracking maid who was more than a match for her boss, George Jefferson. But there was another memorable supporting character, the hotel doorman, Harry Bentley, played by the charming Paul Benedict. He was the Jeffersons' quirky, good-natured English neighbor who had a habit of dropping in at the most inconvenient times. In 1981, the producers decided to give Bentley his own show, Checking In. The premise saw Bentley leave his job as a UN translator to become the manager of a chaotic New York hotel. It was supposed to be easy, until it wasn't. The show was a disaster. The character of Bentley, who worked perfectly as a quirky neighbor, simply wasn't strong enough to carry his own series. The hotel setting was generic, and the supporting cast was forgettable. The show was so poorly received that it was canceled after just 4 episodes. Benedict quickly returned to his role on The Jeffersons with the explanation that his new hotel had burned down, a meta joke about the spin-off's fiery crash. It was one of the fastest and most definitive flops of the era, a show that checked in and checked out in the blink of an eye. 6. The Brady Bunch Hour. In the mid-70s, variety shows were all the rage. Donnie and Marie, Sonny and Cher, everyone had one. So, some network executive had a brilliant idea. Why not take the beloved cast of the recently canceled sitcom The Brady Bunch and give them their own variety hour? What could possibly go wrong? The answer was The Brady Bunch Hour, one of the most bizarre and universally panned television shows of all time. The show featured the entire original cast, except for Eve Plum, who wisely refused to participate and was replaced by a fake Jan, performing cheesy song and dance numbers and painfully unfunny skits. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. The cast members, who were actors, not singers or dancers, were forced into elaborate, sequined musical numbers, often performed in a swimming pool for some reason. The show was a creative train wreck, a cynical attempt to cash in on the Brady name that had none of the charm or heart of the original sitcom. It was canceled after just 9 excruciating episodes and is now remembered as a legendary piece of television malpractice, a show so bad it has to be seen to be believed. 7. Gloria. All in the Family was a television revolution, a show that spawned multiple successful and acclaimed spin-offs, including Maude and The Jeffersons. But then there was Gloria. After her character, Gloria Stivich, divorced meathead on the spin-off Archie Bunker's Place, Sally Struthers was given her own series. The show saw Gloria moving to upstate New York to work as a veterinary assistant. The premise was simple enough, but the show lacked any of the edge, wit, or social commentary that had made All in the Family a masterpiece. What people miss is this key detail. The show was a fairly generic, run-of-the-mill sitcom that felt completely disconnected from the groundbreaking universe it came from. Gloria, who had been a complex and fiery character, was watered down into a standard sitcom mom. Despite a decent time slot and the star power of Sally Struthers, the show failed to find an audience and was canceled after 1 season. It was a rare miss from the Norman Lear television factory, a spin-off that proved that not every character, even from a legendary show, is meant to stand on their own. 8. The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang. In the late 70s and early 80s, Saturday morning cartoons were a big business, and studios were desperate for established characters to build shows around. So, some genius at Hanna-Barbera decided to take Fonzie, the coolest cat in Milwaukee, and turn him into a time-traveling cartoon hero. The result was The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang. The show saw Fonzie, Richie, and Ralph Malph, along with an anthropomorphic dog named Mr. Cool, accidentally getting trapped in a time machine built by a girl from the future named Cupcake. Nobody saw this coming, but each week the gang would bounce around through different historical periods, from ancient Rome to the far future, trying to get back to 1957 Milwaukee. The show was a bizarre and nonsensical attempt to cash in on the popularity of Happy Days and the sci-fi craze of the era. The animation was cheap, the stories were silly, and the entire premise was a complete betrayal of the down-to-earth, nostalgic charm of the original sitcom. It was a show that took the coolest character on television and made him deeply, deeply uncool. It ran for 2 seasons before being mercifully put out of its misery. 9. Enos. In the world of the Dukes of Hazzard, Deputy Enos Strait was the gentle, kind-hearted lawman who was always reluctantly chasing the Duke boys. He was a popular supporting character known for his naive charm and his unrequited crush on Daisy Duke. In 1980, the producers decided to spin Enos off into his own series. The show saw him leave Hazzard County for the big city, joining the LAPD. The premise was a classic fish-out-of-water story, with the naive country deputy trying to solve crimes in the gritty urban jungle of Los Angeles. You might think that's all, but wait. The show was surprisingly serious in tone, often dealing with violent crimes that felt completely at odds with the lighthearted, cartoonish world of the Dukes of Hazzard. The character of Enos, who was a great comedic foil, struggled to carry a show as a serious, dramatic lead. Despite a strong start, the ratings quickly faded, and the show was canceled after 1 season. Enos promptly returned to his job in Hazzard County, another failed spin-off character welcomed back to the parent show with little explanation. 10. Mr. T and Tina. Welcome Back, Kotter was a show built on its ensemble of hilarious sweat hogs. But for its spin-off, the producers didn't choose Vinnie Barbarino or Freddie Boom Boom Washington. They chose Mr. Takahashi, a Japanese inventor played by Pat Morita. The resulting sitcom, Mr. T and Tina, saw Mr. T move his family to Chicago to work for a brilliant but scatterbrained scientist. The show was a cringe-worthy collection of tired ethnic stereotypes and broad, unfunny jokes. And then everything flips upside down. The show was so bad that it was canceled after just 5 episodes, making it one of the biggest flops of the entire decade. It was a stunning miscalculation, a show that took a talented actor and a minor character and stranded them in a sea of terrible writing. Pat Morita, of course, would go on to achieve cinematic immortality as Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, proving that his talent was never the issue. But Mr. T and Tina remains a bizarre and forgettable stain on his otherwise impressive career. 11. The Ropers. On the classic sitcom Three's Company, Stanley and Helen Roper were the quintessential nosy, bickering landlords. Played by the brilliant Norman Fell and Audra Lindley, their constant jabs at each other and their suspicious yet oblivious relationship with their tenants were a highlight of the show. They were so popular that the network decided to give them their own spin-off, The Ropers. The show saw Stanley and Helen move to a stuffy, upscale neighborhood after Helen puts her foot down and demands a better life. The premise was a classic fish-out-of-water story, with the working-class Ropers trying to fit in with their wealthy, snobbish neighbors. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. The show was a moderate success, but it lacked the magic of Three's Company. The Ropers, who were brilliant as supporting characters, struggled to be compelling leads. Norman Fell was reportedly unhappy with the move, correctly fearing that leaving a #1 show was a mistake. After 2 seasons, the show was canceled. The fallout was messy. The producers of Three's Company had promised Fell and Lindley they could return to the original show if the spin-off failed within a year. But by the time The Ropers was canceled, they had already been replaced by the new landlord, Mr. Furley, and the offer was off the table. 12. The Golden Palace. When B. Arthur decided to leave the Golden Girls after 7 incredibly successful seasons, the remaining cast and producers were faced with a dilemma. Instead of ending the show, they decided to retool it. The result was The Golden Palace, a spin-off that saw Blanche, Rose, and Sophia selling their beloved Miami home and buying a hotel. B. Arthur's character, Dorothy, was written out, having gotten married in the finale. But right when it seemed like the end, that's when the real story started. The new show added Cheech Marin and a young Don Cheadle to the cast and tried to recapture the magic of the original. The problem was, the magic was gone. The delicate chemistry of the original 4 actresses was the heart and soul of the show, and without Dorothy's sharp, sarcastic presence to ground the others, the dynamic felt off. The hotel setting felt forced, and the new characters never fully integrated. Despite the immense talent of the remaining cast, the show struggled to find its footing and was canceled by CBS after just 1 season. It was a sad and forgettable end to 3 of television's most iconic characters. 13. Mork and Mindy. Wait, Mork and Mindy a flopped spin-off? No, not at all. It was a massive hit. But we're not talking about the show itself. We're talking about the show within the show that almost destroyed it. After a hugely successful first season, where Robin Williams' manic improvisational genius made Mork from Ork a global superstar, the network decided they needed to fix what wasn't broken. Just when it all seemed figured out, the producers, reportedly under pressure from the network, made a series of catastrophic creative changes for the second season. They fired the supporting cast, shifted the tone from wacky comedy to more serious, relevant social commentary, and tried to rein in Robin Williams' improvisational style. The result was a disaster. The show lost its spark, its ratings plummeted, and fans were left baffled. The changes were so unpopular that the network was forced to backtrack, bringing back the original cast and trying to recapture the magic of Season 1. But the damage was done. The show never fully recovered its initial momentum and was canceled after its 4th season. It's a cautionary tale of network interference and a classic example of not understanding what made a show great in the first place. 14. The Flintstones. The Flintstones is one of the most iconic animated series of all time. So, naturally, Hollywood has spent decades trying and failing to capture that magic in live action. While the 2 big-screen movies are well known, there were several forgotten and failed television attempts that are even more bizarre. The most notable was a TV movie called The Flintstones, On the Rocks, which was a dark, surprisingly adult take on the characters, dealing with themes of infidelity and marital strife. It was so tonally jarring that it left audiences completely bewildered. At first, it looked harmless, but the attempts to make a live-action series were even more disastrous. Multiple pilots were filmed over the years, all of them failing to get picked up. The fundamental problem was always the same. What works as a cartoon? The dinosaur-powered appliances, the rock puns, the prehistoric setting, looks deeply, deeply weird in live action. It was a classic case of a concept that simply could not be translated from one medium to another, a spin-off idea that was doomed from the start. 15. Archie Bunker's Place. When Carol O'Connor's co-star, Gene Stapleton, decided to leave All in the Family after 8 seasons, the show was faced with a crisis. Instead of ending it, they retooled it into Archie Bunker's Place. The show saw Archie buy his local bar, Kelsey's, and continue his life without his beloved dingbat, Edith, who was written out of the show by having died off-screen. And then everything flips upside down. The new series was a success, running for 4 seasons. But the spin-off we're talking about is the one that never happened, but came terrifyingly close. In a bizarre attempt to create a shared universe, the producers developed a spin-off pilot for a recurring character from the bar, a gay teacher named Mr. Van Rensselaer. The pilot, titled Gloria's Place, was a shockingly progressive idea for the time, but was deemed too controversial by the network and was never aired. The decision highlights the strange push and pull of 70s television, where a show like All in the Family could tackle controversial topics, but a spin-off centered on a gay lead character was considered a bridge too far. 16. Frasier. Hold on, Frasier. A flop. Absolutely not. It was one of the most successful and acclaimed spin-offs in history. But this isn't about that Frasier. This is about the Frasier that almost was. When Cheers was ending, the producers knew Kelsey Grammer's character, Frasier Crane, was a star, but they had no idea what to do with him. What people miss is this key detail. The original pitch for the spin-off was completely different. It would have featured Frasier still running his private psychiatry practice in Boston, but the twist was that he would be bedridden after a terrible accident, forced to conduct his practice from his apartment. The show would have revolved around the various characters who came to visit him. Thankfully, this bleak and confining concept was rejected. The producers went back to the drawing board, moved the character to Seattle, gave him a brother and a father, and created the beloved classic we know today. But for a moment, the world was almost robbed of one of its greatest sitcoms by a truly terrible initial idea. 17. After Happily Ever After. In the world of 90s television, the Wayans family was comedy royalty. In living color was a cultural phenomenon. So when brothers Sean and Marlon Wayans were given their own sitcom, The Wayans Brothers, it was a solid hit. But what about the other family members? That's where After Happily Ever After comes in. This bizarre and forgotten sitcom starred an older Wayans brother, Keenan Ivory Wayans, as a former TV star whose life falls apart after his wife leaves him. The show's gimmick was that it would frequently cut away to parodies of classic sitcoms, with Keenan and his ex-wife reenacting their marital problems in the style of The Honeymooners or The Brady Bunch. It was a high-concept idea that was, in reality, a complete mess. The parodies were unfunny, the main story was depressing, and the show felt like a desperate attempt to find a vehicle for a talented star who deserved better. It was canceled after just a handful of episodes, a strange and forgettable footnote in the otherwise impressive legacy of the Wayans family. 18. The New Leave It to Beaver. Leave It to Beaver was the quintessential wholesome family sitcom of the 50s and 60s. So, in the 80s, the producers decided to see what the Cleaver family was up to. The result was a TV movie called Still the Beaver, which was so successful it led to a new series, The New Leave It to Beaver. The show featured the original cast, including Jerry Mathers as the Beaver and Tony Dow as Wally, now all grown up with families of their own. From the outside, it seemed simple, until you dig deeper. The show tried to replicate the gentle, lesson-of-the-week charm of the original, but in the cynical, fast-paced world of the 1980s, it felt hopelessly dated. The storylines were bland, the new child actors lacked the charm of the original cast, and the entire enterprise felt like a pale imitation of a beloved classic. Despite running for over 100 episodes on cable, the show has been largely forgotten, a nostalgic experiment that proved that you can't go home again, especially when home is a black and white world of milk and cookies. 19. The Colbys. In the 1980s, the primetime soap opera dynasty was a ratings juggernaut, a glorious spectacle of big hair, big shoulder pads, and big drama. The show's main rivals were the Colby family, another clan of wealthy, backstabbing oil tycoons. The producers decided the Colbys were so popular they deserved their own show. The result was The Colbys, one of the most expensive and high-profile flops in television history. The show starred Charlton Heston and Barbara Stanwyck, two legends of Hollywood's golden age, as the heads of the Colby clan. But just when it all seemed figured out, the show, despite its massive budget and star power, was a creative and commercial disaster. The storylines were a rehash of Dynasty's greatest hits. The characters were uninteresting, and the show lacked the campy, over-the-top fun of its parent series. Its most famous moment was a truly bizarre season finale cliffhanger where one of the main characters is abducted by a UFO. Yes, you read that right. The show was canceled after 2 seasons, its all-star cast unable to save it from its own mediocrity. 20. Joey. When Friends ended its historic decade-long run, it was the biggest show on television. NBC was desperate to keep the magic alive. So they took the show's most one-dimensional and least developed character, the lovable dimwit Joey Tribbiani, and gave him his own spin-off. The show, simply titled Joey, saw him move to Los Angeles to pursue his acting career. And here's where everything flips upside down. The show was a catastrophe. Joey, who was a hilarious supporting character, was completely incapable of carrying a show on his own. The writers tried to make him more mature and responsible, but in doing so, they stripped away everything that had made the character funny in the first place. The supporting cast was weak, the jokes were lame, and the show had none of the heart or chemistry of Friends. It was a cynical, hollow cash grab, and audiences saw right through it. After a promising start, the ratings went into a free fall. The show was pulled from the air midway through its second season, its final episodes never even airing in the U.S. It was a humiliating end for a beloved character and a cautionary tale for any network that thinks it can recreate magic.